Greetings and welcome back to another Dremel Studios tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to be going through an image that people had asked for a tutorial on. This is the image. I called it 80 foot tall, and it's basically a 2 or 3 image composite, and it was fairly simple to put together. Didn't take a whole lot of time, but the setup and knowing exactly what I wanted to get in the shooting process was the most important part of it. So out of the 2 shots that I needed for the overall image pieces, so there's the wide shot of the driveway and the house with the houses in the background and the sky. And it was very gray, very overcast, yet the sky was really bright, so you couldn't really see the clouds, which was great for taking pictures of the houses. You didn't have a whole lot of harsh shadows, but it also means that the sky was completely useless for the image that I wanted, because I wanted to have some drama and some character in the sky as well in the background, since there was going to be so much of it in the image. So this was shot at, I believe, I want to say 4.5 or 5. I just kind of wanted a wide range without anything being too out of focus. And then when it came time to shoot this image, it was on a very short tripod, very low to the ground, so you had basically the same angle, sort of up. You can see the house is a lot more distorted here just because it's so much bigger than I am, but I wanted to make sure our sizes were fairly close to the same. So this was shot at f8, slightly slower shutter, I think, which is why there's probably a little bit more brightness on the knees and the face. And I just decided to use a tote that I had nearby to lean against. That way I had the same body position as I was going to be using for the house. And you can also see in this shot that there are actually wires that are not in the in this shot. I'd already edited them out, and I couldn't find the original shot that I took of this just straight out of the camera, but it had the wires, and it had some parts over here on the house. The wires are all bunched up that I just cloned out and made sure that the house had just a straight line along the eave there. So first thing I want to do is, so for this image, the only thing that I want in here is the briefest outline. So I'm going to get the pen tool, and then very, very carefully, I'm not sure how well you can see this on the computer or not, but you just want to go in and make a whole lot of little tiny marks, and if you need to, make curves. For some straight lines, sometimes I'll make really long selections, but for the most part I just go very, very close, sometimes cutting off if I know I'm not going to need it, not going to want it, and then I will just make a fairly wide selection around the entire outline of whatever it is I'm wanting to isolate from the background. And in this case, you can see in between the 2 legs there is going to be some amount of background from the house, and that's fine. That's just something you can eliminate later. And I'm going to go a little bit wide on the pavement, on the ground, just because it has a little bit of shadow detail, which will give me better information for later. So yeah, just as far as time goes, it's a little bit on the sloppy side, but I can touch it up later. So once you have made your complete pen selection and come all the way back to where you started, you want to make sure that you connect so that your line, see this gray line that comes up, then you want to right click on a PC and you want to have it select make selection, and it will give you the running ants, as they're called, around your entire picture. Now you can invert and cut if you want to. You can copy, which is what I would prefer to do. That's what I normally try and do. And then with your image of the house, you just go to that and say paste. And now you've got a fairly close image for the final one already. I don't have to resize anything. This is about what I wanted in the first place. You can see that the boot is cut off here on the far right. But if I remember right, I didn't really want that detail anyway. I figured I would be so large I would be slightly out of frame as well. So once you have gone and made a mask on your character, you want to eliminate all of the little tiny edges everything except the line of clothes, and around the hair is a little tricky, but you just want to get in there as fine as you can, make the picture as big as you can, just so you eliminate any details or any shines or anything like that that are around the elements that are the background. Same thing as if you're shooting in front of a green screen or a white screen or a gray screen. You just want to get in there and get all the little details out, and then make sure to go in between the boots and mask those out as well. And once you're done with that process, you should have something fairly clean like this. Now, I am going through this process fairly quickly, hoping that people already know how to mask. I wasn't going to have that be part of this. It's going to be kind of a quick tutorial as far as just how I put this together. But you can see, so for the, zoom in here a little bit. So for the bottom part where the ground is, you can see that I've actually left a little tiny bit right around the pockets and right around the bottom of the boots from the old picture, from the original picture. You can see little bits of gravel and stuff, and that actually helps this get sealed into the same image. It looks like it's part of the same world, even though the gravel's a little bit off. It's such a fine, tiny little detail that most people wouldn't be able to detect that. So I've left some of the shadows in there just because they were not only real shadows, but they look really good with this image, in my opinion. But they are not 100%, and especially right over here where I'm leaning against the house and my head being resting on the house edge. So that's why you want to go in and create a shadow layer like this. Now this was painted in with a brush at about 40% with just a black, and then I just very lightly came in and created a shadow underneath the head, along the back where it would fall along the house, and then came down through here and added some more around the gravel and around the bottom part of the boots, just to help put that in there just a little bit more. And you can make it darker or lighter. I kind of go to taste rather than relying on a particular number. It just really depends on the image. But once I got that in there, and it took a little bit because I would paint some in and it'd be too dark, so I'd go back in with a brush and then just very lightly erase a little bit more of what was in there, and it just kind of attributed it to taste. It really just depends on what you like or what you think looks good, and I thought this looked good. And as far as the sky goes, I selected one of my cloud images. I made a cloud pack this last spring that had a bunch of different cloud images from storms and from different weathers and sunsets and things like that, and I decided I really liked this one, so I selected it and put it in there. And then you can see I did a pretty horrible masking job around the trees, but I already knew that they were going to be behind the figure and the shadows. And you can also see that I didn't want to mess with this tree. It had so much white in between all the different branches from that blown out sky, that really overcast sky. So I decided to make a new version of trees. And again, little tiny details that maybe somebody would be able to pick up on only after they've seen the original, but little things like that weren't such a big deal. Once I had finally put the clouds in there and masked around the house and made sure all the lines were as close as possible, I went back in with a blur brush on the houses in the background and made sure to put them slightly out of focus just so you have that created depth of field. And then the last thing that I did, just because I thought it needed just a little bit more, was right around here around the back of the neck and the hood on the house. Thought it needed just a little shadow just to help pull that in there. You can see that there's just the tiniest amount, but to me it made all the difference. Seeing it without and seeing it with, once you pull back to see the full image, I thought it looked a lot better that way. So once this was all done, I don't think there were any other major things I needed to touch up or alter. It was a pretty straightforward picture. Once I had the idea in my head and I knew what I wanted it to look like, I knew I'd only need 2 or 3 different images combined, and then just the shadows are the biggest deal, in my opinion, to making an image look good, is just making sure you have the right amount of shadows and the right placement of them, the angle. And so once I was done with that, I took it into Lightroom, and I have a very particular bunch of presets that I like using, and this one in particular was just a slight touch up. You can see it's slightly darkened the skin a little bit more, and a little bit of the blues are slightly darker. Yeah, I'll take that and put that on top of it. Alright. There we go. So once I was all done, I just went into Lightroom. There's a little bit of clarity. You can see some sharpening happens here. The clouds get a little bit more distinct, and the blues and greens are just a little bit more, I guess, light. That way you can see them a little bit better. A little bit of contrast added. And it helped right around here in the cheek too with the freckles. Help them stand out just a little bit more, I guess. So in total, the image probably took about 2 hours to create, and a lot of that was, you know, after I had the initial idea and I knew what I wanted. A lot of it was just kind of post-processing. I mean, once you have the idea, once you get the images you need, as long as you have a good set idea and you have to plan everything out. Sometimes weather will throw you for a loop, but yeah, it was pretty easy to put together, and hopefully it instructs you on how to do a few little tricks. That way you can use them for your own images, and maybe it just opens up your imagination a little bit. So get out there and keep creating.